Welcome to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris from Leading the Way. So excited to have this amazing guest. Tom, thank you so much for being on the podcast and the YouTube channel. You've got some killer stories from your clients and can't wait to dive into those. Thanks for being on the show.
Chris, it's an honor to be here. I'm excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Hey, before we dive in, I want to let folks know who the heck you are and all the great stuff you do, because I know it, but they don't know it yet. So let me tell folks a little bit about you. Tom's an experienced leader with an amazingly rich background spanning over 6 countries and 15 industries, from everything from fire art to filmmaking to these amazing adventure things he does with his executive clients now. His journey has been defined by all sorts of diverse challenges that shaped his understanding of leadership and innovation, but really fueled his passion for guiding others, which is what we'll talk about today, on their paths to success. His trajectory has been anything but linear, so he's got all sorts of unique insights from personal and professional growth. He's navigated various cultural landscapes. He's mastered adaptability in multiple sectors. And his personal story is one of pursuit of excellence and self-discovery, but really he creates those transformations for his clients. And his experience as a leader, he's come to realize that leadership, adventure, and spirituality are intrinsically intertwined, each essential for fully grasping the others. That perspective helps him form the core of his approach with his clients, allowing him to guide them through their professional and personal journeys with a holistic and a really dynamic methodology. It's really unique. He's dedicated his work and what he does and how he shows up in the world to empower game-changing leaders and visionaries just like you. His mission is to help you unlock your fullest potential, guiding you not only to achieve your goals, but to do so in a way that brings joy and authenticity into your life and work. As someone who's mastered the art of turning those challenging times and adventures to stepping stones for success, he's here to support you in navigating your journey, ensuring that you emerge stronger, more confident, and more aligned with your purpose. Again, so glad to have you on the show. I know all of your great stories, and let's just jump right into one of them. You were telling me before we got on the podcast a little bit about one of your clients and something about a strangely tied shoelace. What was going on for that client? And zooming out a little bit, what were you doing and where were you?
Yeah, I love that story. First of all, Chris, thank you for that amazing introduction. It's so nice to be welcomed in such a warm and enthusiastic way. So thank you for acknowledging me that way. I really appreciate it. Yeah, let's just dive right in.
Awesome.
So just a little bit about how I ended up with this weirdly tied shoelace. So I create transformational adventure experiences for entrepreneurs, founders, leaders. And on this particular day, I was on a hike with a guy who runs 3 businesses, 45 years old, very, well, I say very reasonably successful.
Yeah.
And about halfway through the hike, I realized that he's got his hiking boots are tied, like they're all weird, like tied around his ankle,
Mm.
which clearly is a safety concern, but also just doesn't look very comfortable. So I said to him, "Can I show you how I would tie my shoelaces?"
Mm.
Which is kind of a weird thing for me to say, and 2 grown-ass men on
Right.
on the top of a mountain, and then I'm down on my knees tying his shoelaces for him. In that moment, he was transported back in time to when he was 8 years old, and he hadn't yet learned how to tie his shoelaces,
Mm.
and he had to ask his cousin and his best friend to help him. And as we then went through the rest of our day, we were able to unpack that. And what became clear is we'd been working together for 6 months at that point. What became clear is every challenge that we had been working on, and we hadn't quite got to the thing, he hadn't found resolution.
Right.
it all linked back to this core belief that he had about himself, which was, I need someone to tie my shoelaces for me. And
Mm,
this was showing up in his business. It was showing up in his relationships. You
mm,
know, he one of the challenges that at some point we were working on was he wanted to manifest a girlfriend who had a car so they could go on adventures together. And I
nice.
was saying to him, buddy, create your own car.
Right.
Right? Um, you know, he lives in Vancouver. A lot of people don't have cars. It's kind of a normal thing. I
Right.
was like, buddy, create your own car and be the guy that girls want to go on adventures with.
Right.
But it just didn't land for him until he saw that he was operating from within this belief of, I need someone else to tie my shoelaces. I need my partner to come in with a car so that I can go on an adventure.
Uh,
Um, and the thing that I love so much about that story is there's no way we could have got there
mm,
if
right.
we were in an office, if we were on a Zoom call, if we were in some kind of corporate setting.
Right.
There's no way. I mean, maybe. I mean, you know, it's not completely beyond the realm of possibility. Um, but he had no idea that that was a place that he was operating from. And you know, as a coach, you know, it's not generally a question that I ask people. I'm like, how old were you when you learned to tie your shoelaces? and and I what I see over and over and over and over and over again is that nature has this uncanny way of providing the exact medicine that is required for that exact person.
Mm,
Right? If I'd have done that same hike with you,
yep.
you would have got something completely different from it, which
Right.
would have been exactly what you need.
Right.
Um, and yeah, so another example is I took a guy on a big multi-pitch rock climb,
Okay.
and something, when I met him, something in me told me that he needed to be pushed.
Mm,
Um, and so we have, right, like literally right by my house, there's a 600-meter granite rock face,
mm,
just straight up out of the highway. And he told me when we first talked that every time he drives past it, he looks up at it and he's just like in awe of anyone who could climb it.
wow.
And so I just said to him, "Do you want to go up there?" And he was like, "Wait, what? What?" Um, and for context, I arrived in Canada with 15 or 20 years of climbing experience, and it took me 2 years to
Wow.
take on the chief, as it's called.
Yep.
I had this guy up there on his second ever time climbing.
Wow.
Um, and one of the things that he took away from that was the fact that I trusted him with my life, because
Mm,
it was just me and him, and he was belaying me, so he's holding my rope.
yep.
And, you know, I pretty well backed myself not to fall on this particular route.
Sure.
And if I did fall, he was the one that was going to catch me.
Yep.
And for him, that was one of the most important pieces, that someone put his trust in him, because that was a
Yeah.
piece of his story. And so that changed his life.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I just love that I can never plan what it is that you're going to take away from it,
Right.
but you will learn something about yourself that will change your life forever.
Oh, it's so powerful. I mean, if folks listening probably have sweaty palms thinking about that the
I
chief
hope
face of
so.
chief or your your shoelace is not tied right. And it's really interesting because our brains, our bodies will package that up and we're not even aware that's going on, in the case of both of those folks, until you're there. And as you said so well, you don't even, and no one really knows what it is, but it reveals itself in these experiences that you do. Um, do you know why that is? Is there something going on in folks' bodies? Are they super present or just all the BS is gone and they're out of their element? Any sense to why this is so powerful?
Um, yeah, great question. There's so many reasons. There's so many reasons. One, One is just nature,
Okay.
right? When we're in nature, we are connected to, and I mean, we're always in nature, right? This computer is an expression of our nature, but what I
Sure.
mean is when I'm in a forest or on a mountain and I'm surrounded by natural life.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm contained in a wood and concrete box. So just being in nature around trees opens some sort of portal that I
Mm.
don't claim to understand, but it for
Okay.
sure happens.
Yeah.
Um, Two, being outside of your normal context, right, opens up the door for new thought to
Hmm.
arrive. You know,
Mm.
when we wake up in the same side of the same bed and we brush our teeth with the same toothbrush in the same way, and we drink our coffee out of the same mug, and we get in the same car, and we drive the same route to the same office, and we talk to the same people. It's like every moment of that reinforces who I think I am.
Right.
You know, and I wake up on the same side of the bed, and I look at the alarm clock, and it says 7:27 a.m., and I go, "Oh, where's that pain in my hip? Oh, there it is. Great.
Mm.
Now I can focus on that all day." So we're constantly creating ourselves as who we were yesterday.
Right.
When we go outside of our context, and that we could go on holiday to Athens, right? And it will have this will have the same effect,
Sure.
just as much as going in a forest. When we're outside of our normal context, we're open to receive because we're slightly on edge, right? Because we're like, you know, from a physiological perspective, we're wondering where the tiger is.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we're in an open state of what's happening around us.
Right.
So that's a really important piece of it. And then the third piece is that we have a visceral experience of things that maybe we already know. So if I think of the rock climbing guy,
Mm-hmm.
another one of his key takeaways was letting go of control and understanding the power of team. Now, he's done all kinds of business coaching. He's the CEO of his own company. He knows that you don't achieve a global vision by yourself.
Sure.
And when he was dangling off the side of the cliff
Yeah.
and I was gone around the corner, and he was thinking to himself, wow, if I died today, would I be happy with the life that I have lived?
Wow.
He had a visceral experience
Yep.
of I could not be in this place with this view looking out over the ocean and the mountains. I could not be here. It would be physically impossible for me to be here if it hadn't have been for Tom, for me.
Right.
And for me, it could have been anyone who had the required skills, knowledge, experience to get to that place. You know, I'm by no means the only person who could have taken him up the chief.
Sure.
I'm probably the only person who could have done it in a transformational leadership capacity.
Right. And on a
Um,
second climb.
and on a
It's
second climb, and
right.
and yeah. So he was very familiar on an intellectual level
Right.
with the concept of a leader should hire people onto their team who are better than them in you know, their field.
Mm.
But he had a visceral experience of what he knew intellectually
Mm.
that he can never unhave. And
Mm.
and so we can talk about the importance of team, and we can talk about, you know, leading from the back, and we can talk about letting go of control, and we can talk about whatever aspect of this particular piece of leadership. We can talk
Right.
about it for hours, and you can
Yeah.
understand it intellectually, and you can take action to put it into place. When you feel it in your bones,
Yeah.
I would literally either be dead or not here, right? If
Totally.
another example that I think is a really good one for here is one of the formats that I do, which is great for corporate teams, is um, I split them into teams of 5 or 6, and we go into a wilderness setting
Mm,
where the team plans their own adventure. And every day, one of the team is the leader of the day, and
mm.
they're responsible for the whole thing, getting from A to B, making sure that everyone is happy and healthy, and creating some kind of experience for the team.
Interesting.
So on a recent one of those that I did in Norway, the guy who put his hand up to be leader first, we all knew he was going to be the guy who put his hand up to be the leader first
Mm,
because it was just obvious from who he was. And I thought, you know, well, here we go. This is how it was always going to go. He's going to do a great job,
right.
and everyone else who's more timid is going to be, you know, embarrassed,
I'll
or they're
shut
going to feel like
down.
they're not going to be able to live up to him.
Yeah.
I couldn't have been more wrong.
Interesting.
He got spanked. And the
Wow.
reason he got spanked is the same reason that he put his hand up to go first, which is he also has a challenge around doing it himself. And so he didn't ask for any help, even though he was
Ooh.
really struggling to read the map,
Yeah.
even though, no matter how much me and the other guide tried to coach him and teach him on navigation, it was like, just wasn't getting it. And
Yeah.
he ended up like a deer in the headlights, and he completely forgot about the team's requirement for lunch.
Oh, wow.
And in the end, he gathered everyone together and did a kind of resignation speech where he was like,
Wow.
I don't know where we are. I don't know where we're going. And um, I can either hand over to the guides, or or we can just camp right here, or I can hand over to you guys. And what happened in that moment was his team said to him, look, you're the leader and we're with you. We'll figure it out together.
Mm,
We then had 5 days after that to help him, or I had 5 days after that to help him when the pressure was off him as the leader,
yeah.
to help him really understand the impact and the cost of not asking for help, of not delegating, of not, because he could have said, I'm not very good at map reading. Who
Sure.
wants to be in charge of navigation?
Yeah.
He could have said, who's going to be in charge of making sure that everyone's got snacks and is drinking, right? Which is ultimately what we want from a leader, right? If the CEO is the one on the computer doing the coding, you've got a problem.
Right. Right.
Um, and so again, it's the visceral experience, and it's also an opportunity to lean into an aspect of, in this case, it's an opportunity to lean into an aspect of leadership that maybe you struggle with or you want to improve on. And so sometimes people are like, well, I want to be more assertive,
Mm,
so they can just lean into that in a kind of consequence free environment because it's not a million or billion-dollar project.
right. Right.
One guy on the recent trip, um, he was a very, micromanaging. He said, like, my challenge is always, I told you so,
Mm,
because he wants things to be a certain way and he's very intelligent.
mm,
And so we challenged him to just let it go,
mm,
let the team do what they're going to do. And what happened was magic, because he had planned a very short walk basically up a logging road to get to a little shelter. And then he
mhm.
wanted to do some kind of team building games and exercise up there.
Okay.
What happened was we found an alternative route, and he said yes to it, which took
Nice.
us up this beautiful little river valley, and we were like skipping over the river one way and the other, and we found this beautiful swimming hole. And And it meant that he didn't get to do some of his activities in games, but actually his objective as a leader, which those games were supposed to accomplish, ended up being achieved in a much more organic and much more holistic way.
Mm.
Um, because he did actually such a great job of just saying yes, basically, to
Great.
whatever showed up. Because we proposed this new route to him 10 minutes before we departed. And he had this whole plan and it was all timed out. And
Yeah.
we said, look, you can, it's up to you, but
Yeah.
this is available. We don't know
Right.
what we're going to find there. Um, you're the
That's hard
boss.
to do when you're, in the business world. If you've got this heavily laid out plan and being honest, got ego invested into it in addition to your smarts, right? Letting go of that
Mm-hmm.
and going for something else, and then the results you can have. I mean, one, the journey sounded like a lot better in that one, and folks had more fun. And two, you could let go of having to be right and it all on your shoulders, and that's a
Yeah.
huge shift for
Yeah.
them. Wow.
And and when you've got your big project with your big client, right, that's not the time to experiment with a new leadership style.
Oh, right. Right. Right.
And when you come on an experience like this, and as a team, you get to see all the different people, how they lead and what they choose to lean in on. Because the fun part is in these experiences, you don't know what aspect of my leadership I'm trying to develop,
Mm,
right? I have a conversation. Well, you have a conversation with me the day before,
okay.
and you're like, you know what, Tom, I this piece of my leadership is where I struggle. And then we
Yeah.
would construct a game basically that allows you to experiment in that space, but the rest of the team doesn't know. And then at the end of the
Ah.
day, we all sit down and we do a 360 feedback. And you say, so, okay, so my objective was to lead from the back. And then everyone goes, oh, wow, you did a really great job. Because I was like, where the hell is Chris? Or
Nice.
what, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I wanted to be more assertive. Oh, well, I really didn't feel your presence at all.
Mm,
So what's underneath that?
yeah.
Um,
I'm
yeah.
I'm curious too. So you said, I think so well, that this is different than just call it normal coaching, normal experience. You go to a conference and learn something. You learn something in a program. It's visceral. And certainly in the moment, it's incredibly powerful, that big aha that you have. Do you see it sticking with folks, with the teams and the leaders afterwards? Is this something that's really lasting in their lives?
Um, great question. Uh, yes, and um, when you have an experience like this, you go home and you're changed forever.
Sure.
And when we go back to the same side of our bed and the same coffee cup and the same car and the same people,
Yep.
the reality that we have created wants to nudge us back
Mm,
into the old version of who we are, right? It's like
sure.
um, like a well-established cart track through a field,
Right.
right? Has these deep ruts in it. And what we do in these experiences, right? And what we do in coaching in general, but in these experiences, it can be really profound, is we take the cart out of the track
Mm,
and we drive it in a different direction.
okay.
Now, just because we've driven the cart in a different direction once doesn't mean that we now have a well-established track,
Yeah.
right? Those synapses, those neural pathways are still much more familiar with going this way than they are with going that way.
Right.
And so while we have, and I love the the analogy of the truck of the cart, because as we
Yeah.
turn the corner, we push a little bit of dirt
Right.
into that old path and we start to create a new one. But then over the months and years that follow, we need to keep driving the cart that way and making a new rut in a way in the direction that serves us.
Gotcha.
So yes, people come home from these experiences changed for life, and almost more important than the experience itself is the integration, is the 6 months, is the year of coaching that comes afterwards,
Right.
where it's like, okay, so we've seen this light, whatever it is. Now what? What do
Yep.
we do with it? And to have that accountability and that integration where,
Nice.
um, yeah, where we can actually implement real and lasting change.
Right. And I mean, I can't think of anything much more important, right? We all have blind spots in our lives if we're human, and even if we're uber successful, that that are not ideal, right? They're keeping us from more success, whatever that means to us, or enjoying that success a lot more and not feeling so overwhelmed and freaked out. Um, so incredibly powerful work. I mean, I'm curious what you've done this for a while. You've had great success with it all over the world. Was there something that just clicked for you one day that said, "This is what I want to do, and here's why," when you started this doing this work?
Yeah, there was. And I want to just, if I can, just touch on something that you just
Yeah,
said about blind spots
sure.
and success. For most people, not all, but most people, and I'm sure you have a version of this that you will say, most of us build our success on top of our pain.
Mm,
We create our company to prove something to our dad or to prove something to the school bully, or do you know
yeah,
what I mean? It's
I'll
like,
show you kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's like a band-aid that goes on top of the wound that we won't address.
Mm,
And we get really good at it, sometimes to the point that we forget that it's this wound that's driving us. And that's how blind spots show up, is it's not like, oh, I have this like big black spot in my vision. I wish I
right.
could see there.
Right.
Right? I'd be so much better at driving if I could see on the left-hand side of my face.
Right.
It doesn't show up like that. We don't even know that we have blind spots.
Mm,
And when I point you in the direction of your blind spot, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to say, no, that's not how I operate. That's not
right.
true,
Right.
because you've constructed this whole reality around, you know, going over and around and behind this blind spot,
Right.
so you can't actually see it. So it's not a denial thing. It's like literally the way the world occurs to me is that this is not an issue for me.
Right. It's not even in the plot of the movie. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and so it takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability to be coached, and to actually, the first step of navigating a blind spot is actually just to notice when it shows up.
Mm,
Um, and again, that's coaching, that's ontological coaching in general.
yeah.
But these adventure experiences just they open up the crack and they shine the light in, and it's like, okay, now look.
Yeah.
Um, um, but to go back to your question, was there a moment? There absolutely was a moment. So um, I grew up. I lived a very privileged life. I never wanted for anything material. I went to one of the best schools in England.
Mm,
Um, and through all of that, I never had any agency. I was in a boarding school that was, my parents were living in Dubai. I went to school in the UK.
mm,
Um, I was bullied at school. Um, there were a lot of other things that happened. And I grew up with a lack of agency because, at this school, everything's handed to you. If I
Yeah.
needed a new cricket bat, I could just go to the shop and ask for one. And
Mm.
so I never learned the value of trying, the value of
Right.
money,
Right.
um, my strengths, my weaknesses. I never really had to try very hard to achieve academically.
Sure.
And then suddenly I got spat out in the world and was like, the hell is this?
Right.
No one prepared me for this.
Right.
When I was 14, I started learning to rock climb
Mm.
and whitewater kayak and mountain bike and hike and read a map and a compass and generally kind of navigate the natural world. And I got really into it and I started chasing thrills and more extreme stuff and then when I got into coaching
Hmm.
and I started doing my own work, I did a timeline exercise where it's a 4-step process. One of the most powerful things I've ever done in my life.
Mm.
One, I made as detailed a timeline of my life as I possibly could, all
Okay.
the events that happened, and as
Wow.
factual as possible.
Wow.
Um, Step two um, was the feeling that those events created in me. Step
Mm.
three was the belief that I created from that feeling.
Mm.
And then the fourth row was what's the new belief that I want
When I
to
moved to,
create for
yeah.
myself. And when I did that exercise, I kind of literally like I had like I don't remember 6 or 7 sheets of A4 paper,
Yeah.
all kind of taped together with my whole life
Wow.
cataloged. And one of one of the myriad things that I saw doing that exercise was that it was the adventure experiences that had taught me the most about who I am and what
Mm.
I'm capable of
Mm.
and how powerful I am.
Mm.
So that was the tipping point, and that was the inflection point where I was like, oh, this is it. Because the other part of the story is I'd always wanted adventure to be a part of my life. When I was
Sure.
young, I lamented the fact that I missed the boat of being a professional. Um, it was just never part of my awareness that I could be a professional windsurfer
Oh,
or a professional rock climber.
yeah.
And so I kind of missed that boat by not training ridiculously since I was 6 years old. Then I was like, oh, I could be the guy that films them,
Yeah.
that does the films of the adventures. And
Sure.
so I went to university, I studied film, and then got diverted onto a different path and spent 10 years in the feature film industry,
Mm.
which was an adventure in itself, but it was not really a very fulfilling one.
Right.
Um, and so then when I did this timeline exercise, I was like, oh, this is it. Like coaching was feeling so aligned with who I am and who I want to be in the world. And then
Yeah.
adding in this adventure piece was like, this is it. This is my dharma. This is my gift to the
Yeah.
world.
Right.
And so I've been kind of developing it ever since then.
So powerful. I mean, anyone listening to this is going to be interested in this for themselves, this for their teams, and I'm sure they're curious, like, how do folks engage with you, Tom, to have that conversation of, hey, I think I want to do this. Can you help me out?
There's all kinds of ways. So the company is called Altitude Evolution.
Okay.
So they can check out altitudeevolution.com and there's a contact form on there that they can send me a message. Altitude Evolution on Instagram. Send me a message that way. Facebook is a bit tricky because there's like 100,000 people in the world called Tom Lancaster. It's,
Sure.
it's not a very unique name. Um, but you can very likely find me on Facebook just by searching for me and you'll see my content I post. Or shoot me an email, tom@altitudeevolution.com.
Nice.
But yeah,
Okay.
probably the easiest is to go to the website and fill out the form, and then I'll be in touch.
Yeah, we'll have that in the show notes. So if you're on the treadmill or driving, don't hurt yourself. They're here for you later, and you can check that out. And I, before we close, Tom, phenomenal discussion. Thank you for the work you do for leaders in this world. I can't think of anything more important than helping set up people for a win and helping them find their blind spots and better paths around them and enjoy their lives more. And folks that are leaders have even bigger impact sometimes, right, on more people in their lives, people that work for them, the people they serve, their customers. So it's a very important bright light that you provide, and very appreciated that you do that. Before we close, I always ask my guests, what's something you're thankful or grateful for about today?
What's something about today in general, or about this conversation?
You get to pick.
I get to pick.
Yeah.
Um, there's one other piece that I want to share, which will help me to get to that.
Great.
Just about why do I do what I do?
Yeah.
It just occurred to me. If you, I'm not religious. I'm very spiritual, but I'm not religious. But if you look at the Bible, almost everything of any significance happened at the top of a mountain.
Mm.
The Ten Commandments, Cain and Abel, Noah's Ark,
Yeah.
the feeding of the 5,000,
Mm.
Moses in the Red Sea, that was like on an epic journey, 40 days and nights in the desert. It's
Right.
all the big downloads, the messages from God, right? And my interpretation of God is that God is in me,
Hmm.
and in you and in everything. They all happen when we're outside of our normal context. They all happen when we're in a natural environment. They all happen when there are a lot of indigenous cultures that call the mountains thin places,
Hmm.
because the veil to the other world is thinner there.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention that. What am I grateful for today? I'm grateful for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'm grateful for everyone listening. I'm grateful for everyone listening about themselves. I'm grateful for everyone who gets something for themselves. Maybe they heard something in one of the stories that I shared, but they're like, oh, that applies to me. And I'm grateful that my friend Tina is coming to Squamish, where I live, and we're going to go and co-work in a cafe today.
Nice. That's amazing. Tom, thank you again so much for being on Leading the Way. You're very high integrity human. You do phenomenal work for others. Everyone you serve, I've been able to see over the past few months in different worlds that we both coexist in. So, thank you for doing that. Thank you for showing up that way to serve, and thanks for uh, just showing up that way. I'll say that twice because it means a lot. For everyone listening, make sure you subscribe and like and do all those magical things, because that allows you to make sure you see the next amazing guest, like Tom. And be sure to share this with a friend too. You probably know someone out there that could really get a lot out of this message and maybe enjoy an amazing adventure and a life shift. So be sure to do that as well. Thanks so much and keep leading the way. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.